You're watching the Everything Network. He grew up in the places New York City forgot. Tenements that leaned, sidewalks cracked, and apartment windows that looked out to nothing but trouble. In those streets, John Gotti learned early that power didn't come from schoolbooks or sermons. It came from how long you could stare without blinking, how well you could take a beating, how quickly you could deliver one back. Before he was a name whispered in cafes and backrooms, he was just Johnny Boy. A sharp-jawed kid from Fulton Street who rarely smiled and never backed up. His world was built from a mix of poverty, attitude, and the rough survival instincts that came with growing up inside the crowded heart of East New York. He saw men with nothing pretending to be kings, and kings pretending to be ghosts. Somewhere in the middle, he decided he would be neither. He would be real. By his early teens, Gotti was already helping himself to whatever the neighborhood offered. Loose cigarettes from delivery trucks, cash from jukeboxes, stray shipments that fell off the back of someone's rote. He wasn't just stealing, he was organizing. The other kids followed him naturally, instinctively recognizing the presence of someone who understood both risk and loyalty, someone who could calculate danger before others felt it. His swagger wasn't invented, it was earned. Long before John Gotti became the charismatic figure of the tabloids, Carmine "Charlie Wagons" Fatico was already a quiet legend in the underworld. Unlike many captains of the era, Fatico didn't rely on theatrics. He didn't dress loud. He didn't talk loud. He simply moved with the confidence of a man who controlled more than anyone realized. Fatico was a Gambino family powerhouse, but he didn't sit on a throne in Manhattan restaurants. His domain was Ozone Park, Howard Beach, and especially the industrial edges of East New York and the Rockaways. He knew every warehouse, every trucking line, every wise guy, and every wannabe within a dozen miles. And he knew the neighborhood kids, too. He watched them the way a contractor looks at lumber, checking for strength, flaws, and potential. Gotti caught his eye almost immediately. Where other teens yelled for attention, Gotti held silence like a weapon. Fatico liked that. He liked the kid's attitude, his refusal to be rattled, his willingness to take a hit and return it twice as hard. But what impressed him most was loyalty. Gotti was dangerous, yes, but he was also dependable. He protected friends. He respected hierarchy. He didn't talk. Fatico saw raw material. He saw a future soldier. Fatico didn't hand out responsibilities. He let men grow into them. For Gotti, it started with simple jobs, bag drops, hijacking lookout, warehouse watches. The environment around him, rusted piers, truck lots, abandoned factories, became his school. And the men around him, older thieves and Gambino associates, became his teachers. The Rockaway crew wasn't glamorous. It was gritty, restless, and constantly hungry. They worked out of garages, diners, auto body shops, places that smelled of gasoline, strong coffee, and anxiety. Gotti blended into it perfectly. He became known for fast hands and a quicker temper. If a shipment needed easing away from a dock, he handled it. If a truck driver needed convincing, he handled that too. But for all the force he could summon, Gotti listened. That was what Fatico valued most. When the older man spoke, about caution, about profit, about patience, Gotti didn't interrupt. He stored every word. Fatico taught him that anyone can commit a robbery, but only a few can run a crew. Only a few could manage money, people, and pressure without cracking. Under Fatico's influence, Gotti's world widened. He learned the gambling lines. He learned loan business math. He learned how to speak to shop owners in a tone that walked the line between polite and threatening. And he learned, most importantly, that a true captain isn't just feared, he's followed. The Rockaway territory was never peaceful. Rival crews poked their noses in. Outsiders came sniffing for opportunities. Hijackers from other boroughs tried claiming turf they didn't understand. Every time it happened, Fatico sent someone to remind the intruders where the lines were. Often, that someone was Gotti. He wasn't the biggest in the room, but he was the most decisive. In smoky bars, street corners, or behind shuttered storefronts, he confronted men far older than him. His message was always the same: this is Fatico's ground. It didn't matter if it was said calmly or enforced brutally, he got his point across. The neighborhood began to take notice. Unlike many mob mentors, Fatico believed in molding Gotti rather than using him up. He taught him structure, how a family operated, how captains moved money, how disputes were solved without newspapers learning a thing. He explained the importance of chain of command. He corrected Gotti's impulsive edges. He stressed that violence was a tool, not a strategy. Whenever Gotti became too bold, Fatico checked him. Whenever he showed good judgment, Fatico rewarded him with better opportunities, bigger scores, more autonomy, more trust. Little by little, the kid from Fulton Street became the anchor of the Rockaway crew. In those years, Gotti wasn't yet a feared Gambino powerhouse. He was still learning, still refining, still growing into the role that would one day make him famous. But the groundwork was laid with a steady hand. Carmine Fatico wasn't just a superior, he became a mentor, almost a second father. The two operated with mutual understanding. Fatico gave direction, and Gotti delivered results. He learned strategy from him the way a mechanic learns from an old master. Absorbing technique, observing calm, studying judgment. By the time the 1960s closed in, Gotti was no longer another Rockaway Street kid. He was Fatico's top man, the young enforcer with ambition in his eyes and loyalty in his bones. The Rockaway crew followed him because Fatico trusted him, and Fatico trusted him because he had shaped him. What came next? The rise, the violence, the captaincy, the path to becoming the Dapper Don, would grow directly from this foundation, a young criminal prodigy forged by the quiet power of Carmine Fatico. The move from petty street hustles to full-scale hijacking didn't happen with fireworks. It happened slowly, methodically, the way Carmine Fatico preferred things. Quiet money was better than loud money, and the Rockaway crew soon discovered that the quietest money in New York came rolling on 18 wheels. The ports were busy. JFK Airport was expanding. Delivery trucks lined the roads from Ozone Park to the Rockaways, like iron arteries feeding the city. And every one of them carried something worth stealing. To Fatico, hijacking was an art form. To Gotti, it was opportunity. He took to it immediately, planning routes, timing pickups, identifying which drivers could be intimidated and which needed to be replaced before they became a problem. His crew became a shadow network operating alongside the highways, always watching, always waiting for the right moment. They scoped truck lots from behind chain-link fences. They studied loading docks like detectives studying crime scenes. And when they struck fast. Gotti insisted on precision. If the job required 3 minutes, it never went to 4. If a driver had to be convinced to forget what he saw, the crew made sure he forgot everything, including how to describe their faces. Every hit raised Gotti's stock. Every dollar earned drew him closer into Fatico's inner circle. The neighborhood responds. With success came attention. With attention came rivals. Local gangs, half-organized clusters of thieves, saw Gotti's crew tightening their grip on the Rockaways and wanted a piece. They didn't understand the rules. They didn't understand that the Rockaway crew was not just a neighborhood gang. It was an extension of the Gambino family. The first time an outsider tried to hijack a truck on their route, Gotti responded without hesitation. He tracked the crew responsible, 3 brothers who thought they had found an unprotected lane, and cornered them behind a shuttered carpentry warehouse. The confrontation was quick, brutal, and decisive. By the time the crew limped back to their neighborhood, they understood that those roads were spoken for. Word spread. The Rockaway crew wasn't just active, they were enforcing. Fatico approved. He didn't praise Gotti directly, he never did. But the way he delegated more responsibility told the story. Gotti was becoming the iron spine of the territory. JFK Airport was its own world, a maze of warehouses, cargo containers and night crews who cared more about survival than rules. It was chaos disguised as commerce, which made it perfect for men like Gotti. Under Fatico's guidance, the crew infiltrated the airport line by line. Skyport loaders, freight sorters, security guards who wanted extra cash, union men who needed protection, and truckers who knew better than to refuse. Gotti became bolder. He orchestrated jobs under floodlights, slipping through the edges of the tarmac like smoke. Shipments disappeared without a trace. Electronics, fabric loads, cigarettes, whatever moved fast and paid faster. He was no longer learning the game. He was running it. His crew trusted him implicitly. They followed him through fences, abandoned hangars, and back rooms of air cargo offices where bribes were slid across tables like admission tickets. And through it all, Carmine Fatico watched with quiet pride. Opportunities brought risk, and risk inevitably brought blood. A rival Queen's crew tried muscling into one of the airport's most lucrative lanes, a high-value cargo route that the Rockaway boys had treated as their personal bank. Gotti didn't ignore the challenge. On a cold night near Baisley Pond Park, 2 cars rolled up on a pair of rival soldiers. The encounter wasn't theatrical. It wasn't loud. It simply ended with 2 men on the pavement and a message echoing across the borough. The Rockaway crew defended its own. These kinds of moments built the legend before the tabloids could ever print it. They shaped Gotti's reputation within the family hierarchy. He was effective, he was feared, and he delivered results. But he never acted without Fatico's knowledge. The captain valued order above chaos, and Gotti operated firmly within that discipline. Everything he did as Fatico's man. As profits climbed, so did the pressure. The hijackings didn't just bring money, they brought responsibilities, organizing payouts, managing jealous crew members, coordinating truck routes, smoothing over disputes between longshoremen and drivers, and keeping peace with the other Gambino factions operating nearby. Gotti handled it all with a mix of charm and menace. Shopkeepers liked him, dock workers respected him, crew members feared disappointing him. Fatico saw in Gotti something rare, a street tactician with the instincts of a leader. While older captains clung to outdated methods, Gotti adapted, moving the crew like pieces on a board only he could see clearly. It became clear that the Rockaway crew wasn't just functioning, it was thriving under his direction. By the early 1970s, Carmine Fatico was older, tired, and under constant legal strain. The responsibilities he once carried with ease were now weighty. Lines needed to be protected. Money needed to be collected. Communities needed to know who was in charge. And so, without fanfare, he began passing the reins. Gotti became the one crews came to for problems. He became the one drivers respected. He became the one the neighborhood recognized as the new voice of authority. Fatico's teachings had shaped him. Now the student had become the field general. The Rockaway crew was no longer a loose group of thieves and hustlers. It was a disciplined operation, and John Gotti was its architect. The shift from the Rockaway garages and airport shadows to the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club didn't happen with celebration. It happened because power was changing hands, and the neighborhood needed a new center of gravity. Carmine Fatico, aging and facing mounting legal pressure, could no longer sit on the sidewalks of Ozone Park, greeting half the borough like an old king on a folding chair. His time as the steady captain of the area was ending, and everyone felt it. Drivers, bookmakers, hijackers, even the local kids who didn't know what the word Gambino meant, but knew not to cross Carmine. For decades, the Bergen Club sat on 101st Avenue like a brick fortress for men who controlled a hidden empire. Now, it was poised to become something else entirely, the headquarters of a rising star who had climbed out of the streets with fire in his eyes and strategy in his blood. John Gotti was no longer the quiet crew leader lurking in the Rockaway shadows. He was the one people went to when something needed fixing, when a debt didn't get paid, when a driver talked too much, when a rival crew sniffed too close to Gambino territory. Fatico trusted him implicitly, and that trust was the foundation for what happened next. The Bergen becomes Gotti's arena. When Fatico stepped back, the Bergen didn't pass into silence. It came alive. The club turned into Gotti's command center. Men who once moved cautiously around him now took positions at his sides. Associates who used to run errands now brought him updates and envelopes. Inside the Bergen, the walls were thin, but respect was thick. Crew members played cards, made collections, argued about horse odds, or simply sat quietly while Gotti held court in the center. He had a natural gravity. Every conversation bent toward him. Yet beneath the apparent calm, the streets outside were boiling, the neighborhood tightens. The 1970s in Ozone Park and Howard Beach were tense, territorial, and unforgiving. Families moved in, outsiders poked around. With Fatico weakened, ambitious street crews from other boroughs thought they saw opportunity. They were wrong. Gotti treated the Bergen territory the way a general treats a battlefield. Every inch mattered. Every streetlight was a checkpoint. Every alley was a corridor. His crew organized day patrols, night shifts, truck escorts, and gambling routes like a municipal force that didn't need uniforms or badges. Anyone who tried muscling in felt the steel behind the smiles. A local stick-up crew tried targeting Italian clubs and card games. Within a week, 2 of their men vanished into the night air, one found later with injuries that sent a message louder than any gunshot. The others disappeared from the borough entirely. The Bergen was secure because Gotti made it so. The Fatico-Gotti bond strengthens. Even as Carmine Fatico's health and freedom slipped, his respect for Gotti intensified. He didn't see the younger man as a threat. He saw him as an extension of himself, a continuation of his rule, shaped with sharper edges. Whenever Fatico emerged from court or legal meetings, he retreated to the Bergen, where Gotti stood by his side. The older men of the family, consigliere, senior soldiers, airport veterans, observed the dynamic. They whispered their approval. They praised Gotti's work ethic, his reliability, his ability to generate money with precision and protect the neighborhood with absolute force. In this era, leaders weren't chosen through ceremony. They emerged through necessity. Gotti wasn't handed the street. He earned every block of it. The hijacking empire expands. By the late 1970s, the Rockaway hijacking operations evolved into something far bigger, a coordinated racket stretching across JFK, the Belt Parkway, and the warehouses of Lindenwood and Jamaica Bay. Gotti modernized the system. He built new relationships with corrupt airport staff. He paid off security managers without ever meeting them directly, using a chain of intermediaries. He created rotating crews to confuse police surveillance. He organized quick sale routes so stolen goods vanished before sunrise. Within the Gambino family, high-ranking figures took notice. Not only was Gotti bringing in money, he was doing it cleanly. No loose ends, no panicked drivers, no sloppy bodies turning up where they shouldn't. This efficiency elevated him from a mere street powerhouse into something closer to a future captain. But criminal empires don't grow without friction. Rival factions, small-time thugs looking for recognition, freelancers hoping to carve out a lane, pushed back. They harassed bookmakers. They interfered with collection points. They tested boundaries around the Bergen territory. The responses grew harsher, more deliberate. A brawl outside a social club turned into a gunfight that left 2 rivals crawling for their lives. A would-be hijacker found himself trapped between 2 vans on Cross Bay Boulevard, beaten so badly rumors spread that he didn't remember his own name afterward. Another, who tried cutting into a cigarette load, simply disappeared. The lesson was simple. The Bergen wasn't a place for negotiation. It was a place where rules were enforced. Gotti's reputation sharpened. He wasn't just feared, he was admired for his control and consistency. Under his leadership, the streets ran smoother than they had in a decade. As Carmine Fatico faded deeper into retirement, both physically and legally, the Gambino hierarchy needed certainty in Ozone Park. The commission didn't need to debate long. Gotti wasn't just the obvious new leader. He was the only one capable of filling Fatico's shoes without disrupting the flow of money or allowing chaos to seep into the neighborhoods. The transition wasn't public. There were no speeches or ceremonies on 101st Avenue, but everyone inside the Bergen knew it. John Gotti had become the de facto street captain. The Rockaway crew was no longer just a crew. It was a polished, structured, profitable faction tied directly to one of the most rising personalities in the Gambino family. Fatico's legacy lived on through Gotti, and the Bergen became the stage where Gotti's destiny unfolded.